Hello, everyone, welcome back to the channel World Conflict Monitor. Please subscribe and like my videos. Today, we will dive into one of the most dramatic developments in Eastern Europe. Putin pulls away from Lukashenko and chaos explodes in Belarus. To understand this situation in depth, we will analyze it from every angle, using the framework of exterior, interior, performance, safety features, unique selling points, price, and conclusion, but all integrated in one long-flowing explanation. From the exterior, what we see right now is the striking visual of two longtime allies beginning to drift apart. For decades, Vladimir Putin of Russia and Alexander Lukashenko of Belarus were pictured as partners bound by strategy, ideology, and necessity. Their relationship was symbolized in countless joint press conferences, meetings in Moscow and Minsk, military parades, and economic agreements that tied Belarus closer to Russia. The exterior, the surface image, looked like one of unbreakable brotherhood, almost like an extension of the Soviet past, where Belarus was considered Moscow's closest satellite, yet now the image is cracking. The surface reveals a more fragile reality, where Putin is taking deliberate steps to distance himself from Lukashenko, while Belarus is being rocked by unprecedented unrest. Protesters fill the streets, opposition voices are louder, the economy is strained, and the security forces are on high alert. The exterior scene is no longer unity but division, no longer stability but turbulence, and no longer loyalty but uncertainty. But if the exterior looks turbulent, the interior tells an even deeper and more complex story. Inside the political structure of Belarus, Lukashenko has been facing growing resistance. For years he ruled with an iron fist, suppressing dissent and silencing opposition leaders. Yet over time, repression, economic stagnation, and increasing dependence on Russia eroded the legitimacy of his rule. The people of Belarus have become restless, with protests breaking out not just in Minsk, but across the country. Civil society networks, underground organizations, student groups, and even workers in factories have voiced frustration. The opposition is not just about one leader anymore, but a broader movement for change, one that wants an end to authoritarian rule and a chance at a new political future. Inside the regime itself, cracks are visible. Some officials remain loyal to Lukashenko, but others fear being dragged down with him. Security forces face the difficult task of holding the line against growing public anger, and their loyalty is not guaranteed forever. Inside Russia, Putin must calculate how much Lukashenko's problems are worth to him. On the one hand, Belarus has been an essential ally. Its geography makes it a strategic buffer zone between Russia and NATO, giving Moscow depth in its western front. Belarus has also allowed Russian military assets, nuclear deployments, and intelligence networks to operate freely. But on the other hand, Putin is cautious about being tied too closely to Lukashenko's failing leadership. Inside the Kremlin, advisors debate whether to keep Lukashenko afloat at any cost, or to allow a managed transition that preserves Russian influence without being shackled to an unpopular leader. Some Russian elites argue that supporting Lukashenko damages Moscow's image, while others fear that abandoning him could open the door to Western influence in Belarus. This tension explains why Putin is pulling away publicly while still holding levers of control in the background. The interior also reveals a psychological dimension. Lukashenko himself feels betrayed by Putin's partial distancing. For years, he presented himself as Russia's closest ally, even allowing Belarusian territory to be used during the war in Ukraine. But now, as protests shake his grip on power, he sees Moscow sending colder signals. This fuels paranoia, erratic decision-making, and a sense of desperation. Belarusian society, meanwhile, interprets Putin's distance as a potential opening. If Russia won't fully shield Lukashenko, then perhaps change is possible. Opposition leaders frame this as a historic moment, urging people to push harder, because Moscow's umbrella of protection looks weaker? Moving from the interior to performance, we need to ask, how well is Putin's distancing strategy performing in practice? On the surface, it allows him to maintain flexibility. He can say to the international community, Belarus is sovereign, Russia does not interfere, these are their internal matters. That shields him from being blamed directly for repression or violence. It also preserves some credibility in negotiations with the West. Yet the performance has flaws. The ties between Russia and Belarus are too visible to hide. Military cooperation, economic dependency, and political support still connect them. Even if Putin pulls away publicly, everyone knows Russia is still the critical actor behind Belarus's survival. The performance, therefore, appears half convincing at best. In the eyes of Belarusians, the Kremlin cannot fully escape responsibility. In the eyes of the West, Russia is still complicit. And in the eyes of Lukashenko, Putin's half-distance feels like betrayal. Looking at safety features, we can see how Putin has designed fallback options to protect Russia's strategic interests. First, by not fully abandoning Lukashenko, Russia keeps military bases, defense cooperation, and economic agreements intact. Second, by not fully embracing him, Russia keeps the door open for a controlled leadership change if protests become unstoppable. Third, Russia has information dominance. State media and propaganda can adjust narratives quickly to justify either supporting Lukashenko or letting him fall. Fourth, Russia can deploy hybrid tactics, economic aid, cyber operations, intelligence agents, without direct public involvement. These safety features allow Putin to adjust course without losing everything. They are like airbags in a car crash, not preventing impact but softening the blow. The unique selling points of Putin's distancing strategy are clear. It gives him maximum flexibility, allowing him to play both sides, supportive enough to keep Belarus under Moscow's influence, distant enough to avoid being fully blamed. It also signals to other allies and client states that Russia's loyalty is conditional, that Moscow will not carry unlimited burdens. This can discipline allies who depend too heavily on Russian aid, reminding them to manage their own stability. Furthermore, distancing gives Putin leverage over Lukashenko himself, keeping him in a vulnerable position where he must constantly seek Moscow's approval and resources. In essence, the unique selling point is that Putin manages to retain influence while limiting exposure. But the price of this strategy is heavy. First, it risks alienating Lukashenko, who could lash out unpredictably or even try to seek alternative backers. Second, it risks Belarus spiraling into uncontrollable chaos, forcing Russia to intervene more deeply later. Third, it damages Russia's image of reliability. Other allies may wonder, if Putin can distance himself from his closest partner, who is safe. Fourth, the West may not be convinced at all. Sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and criticism could still target Moscow, regardless of how much it pretends to be distant. Fifth, the Belarusian people may conclude that Russia is part of the problem, fueling anti-Russian sentiment for the long term. These prices add up, making the strategy dangerous and costly. In conclusion, the unfolding drama of Putin pulling away from Lukashenko while chaos explodes in Belarus represents a turning point in Eastern European geopolitics. On the outside, it looks like distance and caution. On the inside, it reveals fragile regimes, nervous elites, and desperate leaders. The performance is half convincing but fragile. The safety features offer limited protection. The unique selling points grant short-term flexibility, and the price is high and risky. The world now watches to see whether Belarus will collapse, whether Putin will step back in more forcefully, or whether a managed transition will emerge. This moment is not just about Belarus, but about the credibility of Russian influence across the post-Soviet space. For now, the distance between Putin and Lukashenko tells us that even the closest of alliances can fracture under pressure, and that chaos is never far when authoritarian regimes lose their grip. Please subscribe and like my videos for more detailed analysis of global conflicts and unfolding crises.